Salve to omnes and welcome back. For this portion of the video, we are going to be looking at lines 198 to 218 in Aeneid Book 4. This is the episode with YARBUS and his complaining to Jupiter about Dido. That will finish up the first trilogy, the first three videos covering the beginning of Aeneid Book 4 in the AP Latin syllabus. So with that out of the way, let's do this. Fama has come to King YARBUS and annoyed him, and so for the rest of this excerpt of the Aeneid, we're going to see YARBUS and how he deals with what he has heard about Dido. So the first thing we get in these first 5 lines is a little bit of a description of exactly who YARBUS is, and that's hic, right? Because we were just talking about YARBUS. Well, YARBUS apparently is hamonesatus, so he is born or sprung from Ammon. The H is probably silent. Ammon in the Egyptian mythology is Jupiter. Okay, Ammon, Amun-Ra sometimes. He is associated with Jupiter. So YARBUS is one of the children of Jupiter, and who's the mom? Well, apparently that is a nympha. Garamantide is a patronymic. We see that from the ide ending down here. So something like a descendant of the Garamantes. So, and this is a North African tribe. So she was a nympha Garamantide. She's a Garamantian nymph who was, typical Jupiter, seized, right, we're going to say, for rapta. So the nymph was his mother and Jupiter was his father. Now, we see, however, that YARBUS, apparently is fine with this. YARBUS has done quite a lot to honor Jupiter. Posuit is going to be our primary verb, actually for most of this. For the second part down here, we might read sacraverat for the rest, but regardless, let's start with posuit. What has YARBUS done? Well, he has placed, and then we come back up here to see what he has placed, 100 temples, centum templa, imania, 100 huge temples. Okay, Yowi, the dative here. This is a dative of interest, technically, for Jupiter, we would say, as we translate it. But, Jupiter is the one who's interested in these temples, not any other god. Latis regnis, this is just a simple ablative, place where in his wide-ranging kingdom, his broad kingdom, his large kingdom. Doesn't matter that it's plural, right? It's poetry, so we'll just read it as singular. He also placed centum aras, because obviously if you have a temple, you need an ara, you need an altar. So he placed 100 altars. So that might be it for posuit. We can probably read sacraverat for the rest of these objects. He consecrated, so literally he made sacred, he made holy. He consecrated the vigilem ignem. So this would be something like we would say in English, the eternal fire, literally the undying or wakeful fire. This is that, for Roman connotation, this would be the vestal fire, right? The fire of Vesta that must never be allowed to go out. That's why it's vigilem. He also consecrate. Let's just take sacraverat. If you want to read posuit with excubias and solum and limina, could be fine too. But let's read sacraverat with it because it comes next. What else did he consecrate? He consecrated eternal gifts. Excubias are just gifts or offerings. Undying offerings for the gods. Divum here is divorum. Right, again, the syncopated, we just saw virorum being virum a few lines up. Undying offerings for the gods, this would be objective genitive with excubias, because offerings for the gods, they're the object of the offerings. He also sanctified the solum, and here we learn that it's pingue solum, it's not just soil, but it's rich soil, with, right, by means of, the slaughter of, pecudum is a genitive, of flocks. So herds, could be bulls, could be sheep, whatever. He sanctified. And of course, it's amusing too because the sacrifice of so many animals and all the blood soaking into the ground would also help the soil be rich and fertile. So kind of a, which came first, the chicken or the egg? And last but not least, he consecrated the limina, the thresholds of the temples, right? We would say that are flowering, this present active participle, with, right? Flowering with or flowering by means of variis certis. Okay, so various, literally like wreaths or bands, strings of flowers. Okay, which would explain why the thresholds were flowering. Hey. Okay, so YARBUS is clearly a very devout son of Jupiter. And we see here that he is upset. Isque amens animi et rumore census amaro. So we see straight away that he is amens. He's out of his mind, right? He's mad. He's crazed. Animi. Now, this is a really interesting word. Animi, it looks genitive, but it isn't. This is actually a very old use of the locative. Okay, the locative in classical Latin is really restricted to cities, towns, and small islands, along with a couple special words like domus and rus. But here it is in fact being used to describe where he's out of his mind. So he's out of his mind in his mind. Okay, and by the way, if that seems a bit of a strange way to phrase it, that's because this phrase right here, amens animi, is an example of the stylistic device called pleonasm, which literally is just using too many words, multiple words, unnecessary words that say the same thing. So he's out of his mind in his mind. That's a pleonasm. So he's clearly, he's very, very upset, and he is acensus rumore amaro. He has been, kindled or made angry by the bitter rumor. Amaro means bitter. It doesn't have anything to do with love. Please don't get confused. And so he is said, notice, right, dicitur, this passive, something we might see a little bit more in Caesar than Virgil, but here we are. This is what he is said to have done. So, everything else is pretty straightforward. Before the altars, right, ante aras, just where he is, media inter numina divum, next prepositional phrase, amidst, literally amidst in the middle, almost another pleonasm. So in the middle of the divine powers of the gods, or the spirits of the gods, again, divum, syncopated, divorum, we can see the exact same thing going on up here. Here things get a little bit interesting. So suplex is, of course, YARBUS. It's is, right? So as a suppliant, right? We've seen suplex before. He is said to have prayed. For what it's worth, this is also another syncopated verb form. It should be oravisse, but it's just orasse for the perfect infinitive. He is said to have prayed, and then we have two different objects. Okay, we have a double object going on here, and yes, that is perfectly fine in Latin. It's totally okay. In this case, he is praying many things. That's how multa works, is the object of orasse. He prayed many things. Jovem is the object of orasse. It's who he prayed to. So we might think, well, why isn't it in the dative case? Well, because it doesn't have to be. So our translation is unaffected. He as a suppliant, is said to have prayed many things to Jupiter. Manibus supinis. This is the manner in which he prayed, with his hands upturned. And so now let's go ahead and get into what exactly YARBUS has to say to Jupiter, his father. Jupiter omnipotens, right? So just a straight vocative, almighty Jupiter. Cui, antecedent is Jupiter, obviously. To whom now the Maurusian race, right, which is epulata. Okay, so which dines, all right, this is a participle. It is perfect, looks passive, but the verb that it comes from is deponent, so it's actually active. Okay, because you can't be dined, right? So you have to dine. So the Maurusian, which is just a fancy word for North African, to whom now the Maurusian tribe, when they dine, right, or dining, Upon, okay, Toris Pictis, upon painted couches. Okay, so the Marusians apparently are wealthy. What do the Marusian people do dining upon painted couches for Jupiter or to Jupiter? Libat lenaeum honorem. They pour forth literally the offering of Linnaeus. All right, Linnaeum is just the adjective modifying honorem. Linnaeus is another name for Bacchus. So they pour out the Bacchic offering. So they pour out wine, right? It's just a fancy way to say wine. They pour out wine to you, O Jupiter. And then, having invoked Jupiter, he asks the question, Aspicis haec? Do you see this? Right? These things, if you like. That's fine. Neuter plural. Or, father, right? Genitor is just a fancy poetic word for father. To get to the object te, we have to go to horemus. Okay, and horemus nequiquam, the adverb that goes with it. So, father, do we see that this is a question. Okay, so we're going to take it all as a question as we read it. Do we shudder or, cringe at you for no purpose? That's what nequiquam means, the adverb nequiquam. For no purpose. Cum fulminatorques. Now we take a quick look at torques. It's indicative. We know that cum means when. When you hurl your thunderbolts. Do we shudder in fear at you for no reason? And then we shift here and we see there's a new subject. Caeci in nubibus ignes, terrificant animos. So, caeci ignes in nubibus. The ignes in nubibus is clearly lightning, because that's the fire in the clouds. So, we would say, now, caeci here means blind, right? That's what caeci means, caeci ignes. So in this case, given what we're talking about, blind fire in the heavens, so blind lightning, we might just say something like empty or meaningless lightning, right? Just random in the sense of blind. Does random lightning in the sky terrify our souls? And same deal here, inania murmura is kind of the same thing as caeci ignes. Does empty thundering mix, we would say maybe with it? The idea is, you can't have lightning without thunder. So do we fear you for no reason? Is it just random fire in the sky, an empty rumbling that mixes up our souls? We could also read miscant with animos as the object, right? So kind of a synonym to terrificant. So terrifies and upsets our souls, our minds. Okay, do you have any power at all here, Father, all-powerful Jupiter? All right, now let's get to the meat of his complaint. Femina, that woman. Right, we notice that he doesn't even bother to say her name. Quae nostris errans in finibus. Who, right, femina, Dido is the antecedent. Errans in nostris finibus, wandering in our borders or in our land, just a simple prepositional phrase. What did she do? She posuit an urbem. She placed or established a city. Exiguam pretio. This is a fun phrase. Exiguam goes with urbem. It means narrow or thin, but in this context with pretio, it means small or tiny. Tiny in price. This is an ablative of price. Okay, in case you ever wondered how to express price in Latin, we use the ablative. That's in contrast to the genitive of value. So it was a city that was small in price she established as she wandered in our territory. To whom, still the femina, all right, still the antecedent, to whom we gave, right, dedimus. We have to go down here to dedimus. And we see there's another cui along the way, cuique. So what did we also do for this woman? What did we give to this woman? We gave her a litus arandum, and we don't need to worry too much about the obvious gerundiveness of arandum here. It's basically just being used almost as kind of a purpose expression, almost as an infinitive. We gave her land to be plowed. and we gave her the laws of the place, right? So, we taught her about the customs and laws of where she was, because she was a stranger in our lands. And what did she do? This FEMINA, still the subject, FEMINA. She repulit connubia nostra. She rejected our, in this case for connubia, we would say offers of marriage. Obviously, they're not married, so she rejected our offers of marriage, and she received Aeneas. Now, this dominanean, she received Aeneas, we would say, as her master. That's how we go from Aenean to dominum. She received Aeneas as her lord. The idea here is also husband, but the implication that YARBUS has, or the assumption that YARBUS makes, is that Dido is subservient in their relationship to Aeneas. Into her kingdoms, right? Accusative plural in the prepositional phrase, into. She received him as her lord into her kingdoms. Okay. Et nunc ille paris cum semi viro comitatu. And now that Paris, that this of course is Aeneas, obviously. Aeneas is Paris to YARBUS. With his semi viro comitatu, with his half-manly band of men, right? Comitatus, his allies, his companions. They're only half men. What does he do? So this whole phrase right here relies on subnexus, this participle, which, once again, it looks passive, but it's actually deponent, so it's active. What does this Paris guy do, this Aeneas? Well, he binds. Okay, he does two things, and we're going to read subnexus a little bit differently for each of the things. The first thing is the mentum, and the second thing is the crinem madentem. These are each the things that he binds. So in the first instance, he binds his chin. That's your mentum. This is not related to the word mens, mentis, meaning mind. This is mentus, meaning your chin. He binds his chin with a Maeonian mitre. So Maeonia mitra is actually ablative. He binds his chin. So he fastens underneath his chin, we would say. Right? He binds his chin. He fastens underneath his chin an Eastern hat. Basically, a mitre is a hat. Okay, if it helps, it looks like the hat that the Pope wears for formal events. Right? It's tall and pointy. So he ties that again, he's weird and foreign, that Eastern foreign hat under his chin. So literally he ties his chin with an Eastern hat. And in this case, though, so that's for the first one. For crinem, for his hair, he's simply tying it, right? Like tying it back or something like that with his hat. So it's like he's tying the hat under his chin and he's covering his hair with the hat. And his hair that we see is madentem, literally present active participle, dripping. Why is his hair dripping? This is making a reference to the custom, especially if you're wealthy, of soaking your hair in olive oil or some kind of oil because the oil would be perfumed, right? So basically you're just making yourself smell good. And also your hair is then very oily and easy to comb and things like that. It looks very fancy. So, dripping hair. What does this Paris do as he wears these fancy clothes and this fancy perfume? Well, he enjoys potatur, rapto, what he has stolen, or literally what has been stolen by him. But when we translate it, we can say what he has stolen. You'll notice that rapto has been indicated in blue as if it is the direct object, which it is, and yet you'll also notice that rapto here is ablative. And why is it ablative? It's because potior, the verb potior, is one of those puff V verbs that is deponent, number one, but number two, wants an ablative as its direct object, not an accusative. So you have to watch out for those. Last but not least, what do we, and by we, he probably means he himself. This might be the royal we, but he could also be referring collectively to his race, the Marusiagens, right? The Marusian race. What have we done? Oh, quippe, indeed. Oh, yes, indeed, right? So we're getting a bit of sarcasm. We're getting a bit of attitude here from YARBUS. We truly, haha, bring gifts, right, munera, to templis tuis, to your temples, and we, haha, of course, honor or worship for the context, right? We know that this verb foere, we saw it up above in the report of Fama when we were talking about Dido and Aeneas, how they are enjoying themselves. But in this case, it almost certainly just means to worship or honor. We are honoring an empty rumor. Notice again this use of the word fama, but here it's small f, lowercase. So this would be the fama Jovis, right? The rumors or the stories of Jupiter and his power as a god, because what YARBUS is implying here is that Jupiter, in fact, doesn't actually have any power, because if he did have any power, given all of the sacrifices that YARBUS has made and the Marusian race has made to Jupiter, surely Jupiter is not going to allow this insult to stand. And so that is where YARBUS leaves it, again with quippe, which can be translated something as surely or truly, but we need to remember it carries with it a bit of a sense of attitude. You know, quippe, of course, naturally. We bring gifts to your temples, what's the point? And we worship the empty rumors of your power, right? Understood, something like that. That is how YARBUS leaves it with Jupiter, and we will find out in the next portion, which unfortunately we don't read in Latin, we have to read it in English, how Jupiter responds to that and what he is going to make Aeneas do. And that portion, when Aeneas is told what he has to do by the gods, is where we will pick up in the next video. So, maximus gratias for sticking with us all the way to the end. Et valete.